Greetings, students. I'm Dr. Sadri, your instructor for this course. What I'm going to do today is kind of responding to a request of a lot of you. Um, as you know, I'm independent. I don't have any agenda. I do not make my books required for anyone. And as you also know better than probably anybody else because you're in the course, each one of the modules in our course, each one of the reading modules, they have extended number of readings. I guess that's sometimes it's something that students they suggest that sadly gets us to read a lot. Well, I thought that's a part of the college experience. Is that right? Anyway, we are here to kind of develop our mind and academic skills, because those skills are something that's going to stay with us. If you want to develop your muscles, you go to the gym. Is that right? You wanted to develop your analytical skills. That's why we go to college. We are not in the college just to get a piece of paper. Is that right? That would be useless. Anyway, to make the long story short, in my international relation classes, I have talked about the works of a lot of different scholars, simply because I don't want to limit everything to just like one chapter or one article or something, and you will be exposed to only one idea. If that's going to happen, is you don't really develop. Okay, so in each one of the modules, I have usually several readings presenting opposing perspectives or very, very different perspectives. So then that way you read, hopefully you would like at least some of them more than others, and then you analyze, you see the weakness and strength of each one of the perspectives, and then you decide what you think is the right way to think about that particular topic or issue or whatever. And I think that's actually the way to encourage our students to come up with very creative ideas. Otherwise, some of the ideas are going back for thousands of years that, hasn't really changed much. Repackaging old ideas is not a new thing, but I think some of the ideas that you can come up with would be great. All right, in that regard, as you know about my area of specialization is international relations. Of course, I have read a whole lot about different regions, but my geographic region, for all practical purposes, is the former Soviet republics and the Middle East. And even in the Middle East, I focus particularly on the Persian Gulf region. Okay. Interesting enough, the areas that I focus on is the same area of concentration of U.S. Central Command. So that's one of the reasons that for years I've been doing a lot of consulting for the government agencies, from Department of Defense to State Department and some other, other agencies that they are interested in that geographic area. And the nice thing about that is by having one foot in academia and one foot in the government, I have a better understanding of what the requirements are for jobs like that, so I can share that with my students. I am so proud of so many former students who are right now working for the government, regardless of all the local politics or general politics of our country. They're working for State Department, Department of Defense. Some of them are actually working for intelligence communities from CIA, DIA, and NSA, and even each one of the intelligence organization within each one of the forces, and some others. So I'm very proud of them. Okay. So having said that one, what should I share with you? I guess the very first book I want to share with you is a book that I came out last year in January of 2024, because I'm making this recording right now in April of 2025. And here we go. The title of this book, as you can see right here, is basically Conflict and Cooperation in the South Caucasus region. Okay. The first thing I want to make sure that you remember is this. Do not ever buy any of my books, okay? If you're interested in any of our books, first of all, UCF Library has it. That's not one. Many of the public libraries have it. That's two. And let's say there's a public library near your home that doesn't have it. All you need to do is just you Google it, you find it, you see what the publisher is, you take that information, you go to the public library, and you say, well, I'm interested in this book. I noticed your collection doesn't have it. Would you please order it? They order it, they email you when it's ready, when it's ready, meaning that they have received it and they process it, they give it a call number, things like that. They put it in their shelf. They say, oh, Mr. So-and-so, Miss So-and-so, come on over. The book that you were interested in, what? Is all set ready waiting for you, okay? I'm not very much into the whole idea of buying books and things like that because I think that's what libraries are for. Okay, maybe some of the publishers, including my own publishers, are not going to like that, but I think sometimes they really, price some of these books so much. Like, I think this was priced like about $150. What is it? Is it made of gold or something? It's basically a bunch of paper and, some hardcover. You know what I mean? So please don't buy any of the books, that at least my books, okay? Just go ahead and use it from our library for free. Okay, so that's one of the things. Now, why did I focus on this particular region? A couple of reasons. As you know, I've mentioned that a lot of works that I've done is research and reference books. Why? Because I've been working for UCF for 3 decades, and we are a Research One university. So a lot of focus is on the research, new investigation of a lot of different ideas. Now, this doesn't mean that I'm not interested in textbook, but when I retire in about 2 years from now, then I'm going to start writing textbook because I think some of the textbooks in different areas, they are, not so desirable. Even some of those that I am forced to basically use because I just need to have a base for some of my classes. And that's why I complement them with articles or, lecture videos or something like that. So to make sure that the student get that balanced perspective and not just focused and brainwashed by the ideas of only one, author. So I focus on this one for a couple of reasons. Number one is, see, when you look at the world region, this area of the, Caucasus, or better to say South Caucasus, doesn't look like much. Is that right? Looks very small in comparison to everywhere else. Is that right? But as you can see, this is a very, very important geographic area. This is the part of the geographic area that, as you can see, even right here, is that right, in this map, it connects basically, Europe to Asia, to what? To Africa. This whole circle right here. Now, if you notice, a lot of the ideas, a lot of the, Judeo-Christian religions, monotheistic religion came up from here. Going back all the way to Zoroastrianism, which was developed right there in Azerbaijan, is that right? To what? To Judaism, which was developed right here in Judea and Samaria, is that right? Now we call Israel. To what? To, for example, Christianity, which again was developed in the same geographic area. To Islam, which was developed a little bit further south in Arabia, okay? And then last but not least, among these Judeo-Christian religion is the Baha'ism, which, the Prophet was from Iran area, and he's buried in Israel. And again, same type of stories, in terms of Adam, Eve, etc., and same type of, a way of thinking. So this area has been very, very important in terms of not just the religious value that it has, but also exchange of ideas. Is that right? And I'm sure that you have heard about Silk Road. Is that right? Which was basically a business relationship all the way going for centuries from Asia all the way down to Europe. Well, that used to go through this area too. So there has been a lot of exchanges happening, interaction happening in this area. And then many of the empires, as you notice during human history, they've tried to control. If they were European empires, they tried to control this part of Asia. Is that right? If they were Asian ones, they wanted to control this area. Why? Because that would give them an avenue to Europe and Africa. So here, when we are talking about Egypt, we are basically talking about what? The mouth into what? Into Africa. And right there, obviously Asia, and this direction is what? Europe. Okay, so I focus in this area not just because of the significance, historical significance of it and strategic significance of it, but also it has a lot of natural resources. One of the most important one is oil, especially in Azerbaijan. Now, you might say, wow, why is it so significant? Well, this oil has been so significant that it was not only just producing it for Soviet Union, but during World War II, the Germans, when they were cutting through Russia, they were trying to actually capture this area to get their oil because, that the regions that they had did not have, or were controlling, did not have really enough oil. And, you can't have a war without oil and gas, is that right? So that was one of the other aspects of it. That oil right now is coming to the west, is that right? So this is a kind of enlargement of that. That oil, you can see the city of Baku, is that right? There are 2 pipelines that, our government and, businesses that made sure that, as you can see, you see that? You see right here, there is a what? There are the North Caucasus Mountains right here. There are the South Caucasus or Lesser Caucasus area. That oil right here from Azerbaijan basically goes to Georgia, bypasses Armenia, goes to Turkey, and in Turkey, the natural gas one stops right here, and the oil one goes all the way down to what port of Ceyhan, which is right in the what in the Eastern Mediterranean area for what shipments to Europe. So as you can see, the area is strategically important. Area is important in terms of natural resources that it has to offer, and in terms of ideas and everything else, of course. So there is a lot of significance of this. Now, beyond this one, because I do a lot of consulting for the government agencies, I noticed that also some of the agencies, they were so fascinated in the last decade or so, concentrating on the ideas of the clash of civilization, okay, of the late Professor Samuel Huntington. I have nothing against those ideas. I'm one of those people who thinks that there is no perfect, international relation theory, okay? So every theory has its advantages and it has its disadvantages and everything. So one of the things that I try to present when I'm making, any kind of, presentation somewhere at the government agencies or elsewhere is to have to show that, well, yes, I understand that you're interested and this particular perspective has these advantages, but it also has this disadvantage. So what I did in this book, and as you can see, the shorter title of it is, the big title, as I mentioned, Conflict and Cooperation in the South Caucasus region, and the short title of it is From Theory to Policy. So I focused on 3 IR theories, is that right? Basically realist perspective, geopolitics, and then clash of civilizations, to show that each one of these ideas, even the older ones that they were kind of being rejected, and then focus on some of the newer ideas, even the older ones, they have some values. Is that right? You can't just basically throw the baby with the bathwater and say, oh yeah, okay, we got rid of that old thing. Everything has a value. And just because some ideas are old, it doesn't mean they're not useful. I was very fortunate because when you look at the back of it, there were a number of people from the region, that they have actually liked the book, and they thought that was the right thing to do. But what I wanted to mention basically is these 3 countries are very interesting to look at, especially in terms of examining the clash of civilization, because the whole notion of clash of civilization is, that came after the end of the Cold War, was, okay, the ideological warfare is finished, etc., etc. What else is left? What else is left is the conflict between these different civilization and religions and things like that, okay? So basically, Professor Huntington assumed that, one block in the world is, Islam, the other block of the world is, Judaism, another one is basically the Catholic, one the Protestant one the Orthodox one, things like that. And he said that, then of course the Hindus, the Confucian, etc., etc. So he thought these civilizations are going to be conflicting with one another. What I showed by researching the area and each one of the countries is, as I mentioned, it's a country study, is that right? Which is a different type of research. Basically, I focus, beyond introduction to the general area. I included chapters that each one of these chapters focused on what? A different country. So that type of research is, as I mentioned, country studies. And then in country studies, here we go in the table of content, you see that right after a foreword and of course an introductory chapter, I focus on Azerbaijan in one chapter, Armenia another chapter, Georgia another chapter, and then conclusion. So each one of the chapters focus on both the domestic development of each one of these countries in the modern period and their foreign relations and military and everything else. And also in terms of relationship with not just each other, but also with the regional power. So here we go. These countries, Azerbaijan, Armenia, and Georgia, they've had, each one of them, they have a relationship with one another. They also have relationship with some of the regional powers, Iran and Turkey. 2 countries that are both Muslim, but coming from very different background. Iran representing the Shiite perspective and theocracy, Turkey representing a modern, Sunni, and secular type of, political development. They're competing there. In addition to that one, guess what? Of course, these are southern part of Russia. Russia is there as one of the great powers involved in the politics of the region, okay? And then what? European Union, which is receiving oil, is involved. And then, of course, we Americans are involved. I have a prediction that even though China is not so significant, doesn't have a significant presence as of now in 2025, but it's growing because we can see activities of the Chinese right there more and more and more through the Belt and Road Initiative. So, having said that one, when I examine and I put everything in, for example, in terms of testing the theory of, what do you call it, clash of civilization, I end up with having creating some tables showing that, if the relationship between each one of those dyadic, for example, let's say Azerbaijan and Armenia, Azerbaijan and, maybe one of the local, regional powers like Turkey or Iran, and that one with, of course, global powers like Russia or, European Union or US. If it is based on the expectation of the, clash of civilization or not, is it positive, negative, neutral, etc., etc. I did the same thing. One of the very, very strangest one came out to be and it's not the only one, was the relationship between Armenia and, Iran. Armenia is a Orthodox Christian country, is that right? It's not supposed to get along with a Shiite country like Iran, because Shiite country like Iran is supposed to have a very, very close relationship with Shiite majority country Azerbaijan. You see what I mean? Considering that, the Azeris in Iran are one of the most significant ethnic minorities. So contrary to the ideas of the theory, Iran has a very close relationship with Armenia, which was controlling up to just a couple of years ago a significant percentage of the land of Azerbaijan, and didn't have really very close relationship with Azerbaijan. You see what I mean? So Azerbaijan had a very, very close relationship, for example, with Israel, which, Israel and Iran, they don't get along. So you see what I mean? So looking at it at a superficial level doesn't really give us understanding of the complex, a relationship that really exists over there. So when I looked at that one, I noticed that in 2/3 of these dyadics between each one of those local countries and each one of the regional powers and then each one of the global powers, the clash of civilization doesn't work. Now, it doesn't mean that you can throw it away, is that right? Because in 1/3 of the cases it applied. But in the other 2/3, seemed like the other, theories, they seem to be very practical. Like, the realist perspective that I'm sure that you remembered very well from some of our studies, and also geopolitics, is that right? So these are some of the things that we have done. I'm going to have some other, actually works coming out. I'm constantly writing, obviously, in addition to enjoy teaching, my students. So, and those are going to focus on the other part of Eurasia. And that one, I'm going to focus, for example, on Central Asia and others. So we introduce those regions to the student as well. And as you can see, it's one thing to read about concepts, theories, methods, or some policies of, international relations. It's something else to actually apply it to a geographic region which is tremendously diverse. Is that right? Now think about every time a new religion came to this area, new ideas came over there, people who didn't want to convert to that idea, they escaped. Where did they escape? To the mountains. Look right here. The reason there is such a diversity is because in these mountains, they became basically a place for people to, for refugees, okay? For political, religious, refugees. So when we are looking at it in 21st century, any kind of religion you can think of exists in that region. Any kind of ethnic group you can think of course, the larger one are mentioned right here. We say, oh, Azeris, Armenian, Georgians. But remember, in Georgia itself, for example, South Ossetians were different from Georgians, different language, different culture. Is that right? Or for example, Abkhazian. And then if you recall, if you read some of the material, you would see that in way before Russia invades Ukraine, Russia had invaded what? Invaded Georgia and had taken control of those two regions. You see what I mean? So that makes it very, very interesting in terms of really focusing on real examples. Is that right? Not thinking about it theoretically only. All right. I hope that this has helped you a little bit to think in a different way. about some of the works that is there. As I mentioned, don't buy it. Okay, you can always use it from our library. Go ahead, and if you are interested, borrow it, or one of the public libraries are on. And if it doesn't, the nearest one, as I mentioned, doesn't have it, you can always Google it, take it over there, and then they order it for you, and you can read it later. Okay, and if you have any question, feel free as usual to email me, either to our course, or for example, you have my email to UCF, you can contact me that way. You take care. All right, have a good one.